Well, welcome to all of you in our online audience. Thank you so much that you do take in our worship services week to week. Really, really appreciate that. Now, today is a very special day, and we're doing something a little bit different. In our live service, we're going to a park in Evansville, Indiana, and we're going to have a baptism service. And our baptism services are always very, very encouraging and refreshing. Now, what we're trying to do is to broadcast it online, but something could happen to the internet, and it may not happen. So I want to pass on to you, in light of our baptisms, one of the most encouraging truths I've ever heard. And it started I went through a season years ago where I got to travel a lot, and I got to go to kind of far off places. I spent time in China, in Thailand, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Myanmar. And what I learned, as much as anything, was that God is at work all over the world. He really, truly is. And he's at work in individual people. And the thing that was so helpful for me in that is I have to remember that CNN or Fox, they're not going to report on that. They're not going to say that's going on. But you have to trust that it is. But I learned that it absolutely is. I remember a conversation with a Korean-born young man in China where he was telling me about the journey that he had where God had changed his life. And I need to remember that all the time because God has a heart for the nations and everything else. But I need to remember that as much as anything as I go throughout my own Christian walk and I do the things that we do. I pray and I go to worship services or involved in a group or I take part in a service opportunity. I need to remember these things are not in vain. Sometimes it can feel that way because it's just normal life. But I need to remember that God is at work. We did a series called Power just over the last month. And one of the main points I wanted to make and everybody take away with was that God's power is not necessarily something flashy, something just stupendous or anything like that. It can be very simple, but most importantly, it's meaningful, and it's meaningful to the people that are encountering His power. He does those kinds of things throughout our normal lives. Well, I call baptisms, among other things, the great reveal, because we've done hundreds of these now over the years. And it never fails to amaze me and encourage me that it shows me that God is at work in individual people's lives, even when I don't see it. Because we do our worship services and we go to groups and we do service opportunities and we kind of go through life. And what baptism is a time when God reveals even just a little bit of what He's been doing in people in ways that you would never have seen. We have people, the way we do baptisms, we have them sit down and write out their story. And we have a class where we kind of help them with that. And we start by listening to their stories in just a conversational way. And that's when we get the glimpse. Then we write it down and we read it at our baptisms. And we read it because we don't want people to have to give some giant speech or anything like that, because we know that would put undue pressure on people. But we do read it out loud. And it's amazing the journey that people have been on. And you get that glimpse of what God has been doing in people while we've been going about our so-called normal lives and doing the normal things of the Christian life. And that's one of the greatest and most encouraging truths I've ever heard, because I believe, and I can't prove this necessarily, but I can provide evidence for it from the Bible, that one of the things that God is going to do at the end of the age when we're in heaven is He's going to show us much, much more of what He shows us at these baptism services. As we listen to people and we listen to the journey they've been on, we'll get to see how the journey really did play out and how we got to participate in that. Through a simple prayer. Maybe you've prayed for a person and their life was changed as a result of that prayer, but they took that life change and impacted someone else, and they impacted someone else. And that went on not only exponentially among people, but it went on through time. I can still remember a young woman that I know died early. She died in her 30s. When I was a kid, she was involved in kids ministry. I still remember her. I still know that her life impacted me. And every bit of the impact that I have in other people's lives, I think that goes back to her as well. And she shares in that. Well, baptism is a way of seeing that and experiencing that. So I would encourage you, if we're able to listen to the stories. If we're not, just trust that it is going on, even in the course of our normal, so-called normal Christian lives.